Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. I've been motivated strongly to discuss this topic because of recent events that have happened in my life that you may or may not be aware of. But I've been asked regularly, how do I deal with a narcissist? Oftentimes I get questions from people on Facebook and Instagram and other places where people are in a relationship with a narcissist, or they have a family member that's a narcissist, or a boss that's a narcissist. And the reason I want to deal with this on the podcast, it's a uniquely spiritual issue, and I want to filter this through the teachings that we've had, discuss my own experiences, and perhaps come to some way of dealing with narcissism on this planet, in this experience, in this illusion. Let's look at what we know right now about third density moving to fourth density Earth from our readings from Quo and Ra in the Law of One material. In that material, it indicates that the Earth is moving from what is called third density into fourth density. Each is a different sort of consciousness level of experience. We have been on this Earth through many different incarnations, and if we, during this particular lifetime, can become service to others, meaning that we help others 51% of the time, then we can move on to fourth density. It's sort of a graduation that occurs, like getting a grade in class, like getting an A is 90%, right? It also indicates in the Law of One material that if you're service to self, meaning you only work for and take care of and think about and serve yourself 95% of the time, then you can graduate into a fourth density negative polarity where you focus on the self. And a lot of what we're going through in third density is a choice. We're choosing whether we are service to others or whether we're service to selves. There's some devout spiritual people that are service to self, and there's some devout spiritual people that are service to others. But one thing that is a definite part of third density, and in particular is a unique aspect to the transition from third to fourth density, is that as we move into the fourth density new Earth, we're going to confront with a lot of narcissists. A narcissist is someone that obviously is completely service to self. When I say the word narcissist, do you know what that means? Do you really understand what that means? I'm sure that you've met a narcissist. You may wonder if your partner or coworker or family member is a narcissist. And while many people have what doctors call narcissistic traits like self-importance and entitlement, people diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder can be a big or even bigger challenge. Living with a narcissist requires a sort of different emotional skill set, according to many social workers. Having a narcissist in your life can be frustrating and emotionally challenging. But as we have read the Neville Goddard material and the Joseph Murphy material, they're a reflection of yourself. So in some cases, the idea that everyone is you pushed out can be a form of spiritual bypassing. Yes, we can recognize the narcissistic aspect of others in ourselves, but I think it goes much further. How do we deal with these narcissists? What do we do? Narcissists have a strong sense of grandiosity. That means they think that they're more important than others and they seek out admiration. A client that one psychologist worked with said for years terminated therapy when he saw his website and was insulted that the website didn't talk about him after he had taken care of a narcissist. They have a strong sense of grandiosity. They're arrogant. They take advantage of others to get what they want. They believe they are unique or special over everyone else. They exaggerate their achievements and talents. They need constant admiration. They feel envy toward others. They believe others envy them. They lack any empathy for others and what they're going through. They're obsessed with fantasies of brilliance, power, or success, and they have a certain sense of entitlement. Many psychologists and writers have learned a lot about narcissists from their older siblings and family members and their experience working with them. One psychologist said, "I've learned that narcissists are the focus of their own lives. They often believe they're perfect and blame others for issues that arise at work, home, or social situations. I have found often narcissists are incapable of apologizing or taking responsibility for anything that they do. Narcissists may do whatever it takes to get what they want, and whatever it takes means whatever it takes. They don't care if they crush you, they walk all over you, they generally don't feel any compassion, and they don't connect intimately with others, even the people who are closest to them. At work, a narcissist may seek admiration even if it hurts others, and they don't care. They may take credit for other people's work, undermine coworkers, or change their behavior to get approval from higher level people. They will lie no matter what. They may seem friendly and hardworking, but there's often more to it than meets the eye. At home, a narcissist can impact the whole family. If you're in an intimate relationship with a narcissist right now, they may be highly critical of you, distant and dismissive. You could feel invisible, disrespected, and lonely. When they act like they're loving you, they're just wanting your admiration so that you love them. If you're a child of a narcissist, you may have been neglected or abused, and oftentimes a child of a narcissist sees that reflection, as with many children, and act narcissistically, not understanding that that is not normal. So sometimes it's best to simply cut ties with a narcissist, and in many cases, that is the best way to deal with it. I want to talk about how we deal with it, how it's affecting our country, what we do. One friend of mine said, "For my own mental health, I've chosen to step back from investing in a personal relationship with a sibling." She accepts that her sibling just doesn't see behavior as a problem, and there's no way to change them. In many of my experiences, I've found there's simply no way to change the narcissist. So the question is, what do you do with a narcissist? How do you deal with them? How do you cope with them? The word narcissist is one of those tricky terms that is both luxuriously broad in meaning. It's defined in dictionary.com as a person who is overly self-involved and often vain and selfish. It's also clinically specific. A narcissist from a psychiatric perspective is a person suffering from NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder. It's a formal diagnosis coined after years of psychoanalytic study. NPD is defined as a cluster B personality disorder comprising a pervasive pattern of grandiosity and fantasy or behavior, need for admiration, and lack of empathy. As a spiritual teacher, I'm interested in exploring narcissism in the latter sense as a pathology rather than a lax term for a self-absorbed person. If somebody has a disease that is narcissism, should we forgive them? Can we change them? Is there something that we can do? Or do we accept them? How do we deal with it? Obviously, narcissism has been around as long as humanity has been around and has been recognized for that long. I would suspect that many or most of our leaders are narcissistic on some level. The term itself comes from the story of Narcissist in Greek mythology, dating back to at least 8 AD. As to the formal diagnosis that arises from psychoanalytical thinking, starting with Freud, but without different schools of psychology accepting slightly different understandings of the pathology, personality disorder over ensuing years. The telltale traits of a narcissist go well beyond just being self-absorbed. On some level, we are all initially self-absorbed in our lifetimes. Kevin Humphreys, a psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry at Stanford Healthcare, explains that we all come into the world with needs that we want to be filled, and no one asks a baby to reason with them. They just say, "Oh, here, let me feed you, let me cuddle you, and sing to you." And as we grow up, we learn that other people need things too. Now, we may have moments where we're very selfish, but it's on a continuum. And for narcissists, though, it's all about the self. Narcissists are just stuck there in this bottomless, constant need in love of self, which can lead to terrible things. A narcissist will destroy a country just for their own needs. A narcissist will kill if it helps them out. They will lie. They will do whatever it takes. There are many masks and many telltale traits, self-concern, self-centeredness, and self-consciousness that is completely disproportionate extreme sensitivity to negative feedback or criticism, significant need for approval from others. This may be due to inadequacies that are both real or imagined. Oftentimes they have poor self-esteem, and it's expressed through self-deprivation or arrogance. They have difficulties in maintaining relationships. They often idealize others that represent perfection, followed by devaluing that person when they perceive to have failed them. They are preoccupied with outward appearance, beauty, wealth, fame, success, over morals or virtue or even integrity. They can't regulate their own emotions or aggressive impulses. They're fragile, they're vain, they're self-righteous, they're prideful, they lack remorse, and they lack compassion and empathy for others. And oftentimes they lack compassion even for themselves, which sounds like a contradiction, but it may be one way that we can deal with it. Narcissists seldom ever seek treatment because they're incapable of admitting that they have any sort of problem, and that's the crux of it. Because of that, I get people that say, hey, I want to change my brother, my friend, my sister, my mother, because they're narcissistic. Maybe if I can imagine them not being narcissistic. And the question here that I'm asking is, how should we be imagining for those narcissists? Because they're on their own spiritual path, and that is a part of their spiritual path. So do we want to change that? And in some cases, when you're incapable of changing the narcissist, it's because they're activated, they're imagining, and that is what they want. Obviously, we all have some narcissistic qualities, which run along a spectrum. There's a radical difference, though, between having narcissistic qualities, being somewhat self-centered, and being a full-fledged narcissist. One should never self-diagnose. If you're worried that you might be a narcissist, you're probably not one. Narcissists generally lack the kind of empathetic self-reflection that might make them wonder if they have a personality disorder of any kind. This is why narcissism is seldom treated. There's very few people that have been able to treat it. And one psychologist adds that it's impossible to truly quantify how many people have the disorder. Rarely does someone come to a psychiatrist and say they read about narcissism and they think they're a narcissist and they want to get help. It just never happens that way. So the question is, how does somebody become a narcissist? In some cases, it's nature. Some cases, it's because of their upbringing. And I believe in many cases, it's the soul's spiritual push. We all make a choice. And if a soul has made the choice, hey, I want to be service to self. That's my spiritual path. I have chosen love of self, not others. And that is the reason that they're pushing. They've given themselves the narcissistic personality disorder to push them over top, to graduate into that next level. And we're seeing it more and more because we're at the end of third density. And that's why they're pushing to reach that level. We see it on TV. We see narcissists that lead countries, that lead armies, that are in politics, that are in the media, that are artists all over. One authority says, my view is that it's probably about 25% constitutional and 75% experiential. A narcissist doesn't necessarily come from a dysfunctional family, but narcissism can occur because a parent or caretaker wasn't able to provide emotional attention. Or it could be a flip side. A parent provided too much attention and the child never learned frustration tolerance. It really depends on the same situation can result in different outcomes. The thing that's tough to deal with in my experience is that narcissists are master manipulators. They're notoriously difficult to deal with because they are masters of manipulation. Britt Frank, a licensed master social worker, says they are skilled at finding pressure points and know exactly what to say or do to push our most vulnerable and wounded inner parts. Though narcissists clearly do not have your best interests in mind, they do, as Michelle Leno, a psychologist and owner of DMI Psychological Services, notes, have the ability to love you. Narcissists are capable of love, according to her. However, their love feels conditional and wavering because they want to control you. There's no unconditional love in a narcissistic relationship. Narcissism can be very problematic in some relationships and environments and not in others. I've seen a few. And oddly enough, sometimes when two narcissists are together, it seems to work out. How do we cope with it? I think it comes down to setting boundaries and, in many cases, cutting ties. We shouldn't diagnose others as being narcissistic. You can see the traits. So what we can do is identify narcissistic traits that we see in people who we suspect are narcissists. From there, we should try to engage a conversation about it with them and or support systems. And if the person is a full-blown narcissist, they're unlikely to respond favorably. Additionally, if you're dealing with an authority figure, this may not be a topic you can appropriately bring up. If you're stuck with a narcissist who has targeted you, your goal should be getting out of the relationship. Or if it's a close family member who you don't want to cut out of your life, then you need to work very hard on setting boundaries so that they don't eat you up. If you're stuck with a narcissist, because what you have to do is internally not let them gaslight you. Recognize that you understand reality more than they do, but that you are not their therapist or their teacher or anything for them. Just protect yourself. The key is to make their behavior less harmful to you. Educate yourself. Find out more about narcissists. It can help understand the strengths and weaknesses and learn how to handle them better. Knowing who they are may also allow you to accept the situation for what it is. Create boundaries. Be clear about your boundaries. Speak up for yourself. When you need something, be clear and concise. Make sure they understand your request. Watch your wording. Narcissists don't take constructive criticism well. So, stay positive and be careful with what you say. Stay calm. Try not to react. If they try to pick a fight or gaslight you, they will try to trigger you. If they lash out, think of them as a 3-year-old who feels rejected when you're going to the grocery store because you didn't buy them candy. Create a support system. Living with a narcissist can lead to feelings of insecurity, confusion. They will try to tear you down in order to build you up. The classic narcissistic behavior is they will say, "You're a terrible person," and they try to make you feel small and little. I tell you from my own personal experience, you will never win an argument with a narcissist. Just forget about it. Don't argue or confront. It's just not worth it. As difficult as it may be, you will definitely want to respond in an argument. It can be better to manage their need to feel in charge. Don't try to direct them. They like to have control and often fear losing it. So when you communicate with them, make them feel like they're in control. Don't expect them to see your point of view. Don't expect there to be any meaningful communication. If you are pretty aware that they're a narcissist, remember they have very little empathy, but they can fake empathy. So honest, heartfelt communication doesn't get through and can even create an angry outburst or a shutdown response. Don't go over past issues. It's not going to work. Break the spell and stop focusing on them. When you're around them, they almost create a sort of magical spell that makes them and everybody around them focus on them. When they're in your orbit, attention seems to gravitate their way. That's by design. Whether it's negative or positive attention, those with narcissistic personalities work hard to keep themselves in the spotlight. When a certain channel or author feels like they're running out of attention, they will try to evoke some way of gathering attention to them, and they'll do everything it takes. You might find yourself buying into this tactic, pushing aside your own needs to keep them satisfied. If you're waiting for a break in their attention-seeking behavior, it's never going to come. No matter how much you adjust your life to suit their needs, it's never going to be enough. If you must deal with a narcissistic personality, don't allow them to infiltrate your sense of self or define your world in any way. You matter too. Regularly remind yourself of your strengths, desires, and goals. Take charge and carve out some me time. Take care of yourself. Expect them to push back. If you stand up to someone with a narcissistic personality, expect them to respond. Once you speak up and set boundaries, they may come back with some demands of their own. They may also try to manipulate you into feeling guilty or believing that you're the one being unreasonable and controlling. They might make a play for sympathy. It is not genuine or real. Be prepared to stand your ground. If you take a step backward, they won't take you seriously next time. Remember that you are not at fault. A person with a narcissistic personality disorder isn't likely to admit a mistake or take responsibility for hurting you. Instead, they tend to project their own negative behaviors onto you or someone else. So they will say, oh, this person did this terrible thing. And oftentimes what they're accusing you of is what they are doing. And you might be tempted to keep the peace by accepting the blame that they give you, but don't. You don't have to belittle yourself to salvage their ego. You know the truth. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Find a support system outside of this person. It will help. A narcissist is good at making promises, but never following through. They promise to do what you want and not to do the thing you hate. They promise to generally do better, and they might even be sincere. But make no mistake about it, the promise is a means to an end for someone with a narcissistic personality. Once they get what they want, the motivation is gone. You can't count on their actions or matching their words. Ask for what you want if you're in a situation and stand your ground. Insist that you'll only fulfill their request after they have fulfilled yours. Don't give in on this. Consistency will help you. They may need professional help. Look at them lovingly in their worst situation and understand it's a state that they're in. It may be a state they've chosen to remain in as a part of their spiritual path. It's easy for you to feel anger or hate. But here's where we talk about the Neville Goddard aspect to this. Recognize it in yourself. Recognize that there is a narcissistic aspect to yourself and learn to heal that. Your awareness of this narcissism within yourself perhaps may, in some ways, heal that other person. It's sort of the inner child in you that is seeking out attention, that is seeking out love. And if you can give that inner child love, in some cases, it will heal the person that you see that is lashing out with you in a narcissistic fashion. If it doesn't, it's just part of their personality. And there's a point at which you reach where they have chosen not to accept your imaginings, essentially. Their inner soul is still pushing to graduate and wants to continue on that path. So just move on. If they start name-calling, insulting, patronizing, publicly humiliating, public forms of humiliation is a sign just to completely abandon them. Yelling, threatening, jealousy, accusations, that is a sign of a true narcissist. Blaming you for everything that goes wrong, monitoring your movements or attempting to isolate you, telling you how you feel or how you should feel, routinely projecting their shortcomings onto you, right? They may be a little overweight and they tell you that you're overweight. It's because they recognize in themselves they're incapable of criticizing themselves in any way. Denying things that are obvious to you or attempting to gaslight you and lie to others about you. This is what I've had to deal with recently with a narcissist who provably lied about me on a regular basis. And so at that point, there's nothing that you can do to change it. And any level of confrontation or negotiation is simply not going to work. You can try to say, hey, I'm sorry, I apologize. What's wrong? You know what? When you do that, it turns out it doesn't really work. They're going to trivialize your opinions. They're going to trivialize your needs. So just leave. And for many cases, I know when I say leave the relationship, that's hard. You're living in the same house, you're in the family, you're raising kids, or it's some other situation. But if you can leave, then you should leave. If you know that that works against you. And the problem is when you're with a really powerful narcissistic personality, they can manipulate you into submission where you don't feel like leaving is even a choice. So if you're in a situation where you can't leave, then actively ignore them. This might be hard. Now, there are some people that recommend glorify them, kind of like playing the game of the pendulum. Tell them that they're amazing. Feed them with what they want. It doesn't have to be real. Tell them that they're beautiful and wonderful and amazing, and then escape. Get the heck out of there. That's one way. Feed them what they want, which is attention and tell them they're beautiful, all the superficial things about them, and then slowly escape. What I found when you do this, sometimes they become addicted to your attention that you give, and they seek it out even more. Every situation is going to be a little bit different. There is an amazing book that I recommend that you read that is pretty eye-opening, and that is The Narcissism Epidemic, written by Jean Twenge and W. Keith Campbell. It really does focus on the United States mostly, but it shows that narcissism is an absolute epidemic in the United States. It's a result of our culture, of our television, of the way our families are being raised. It's our country's focus on self-admiration has certainly been successful in raising America's opinions of themselves. Self-esteem is at an all-time high in many groups. 80% of recent college students scoring higher in general self-esteem than the average 60s college student. The thing that's interesting is I get a lot of requests to talk about self-image and self-confidence with people that are really genuinely suffering. And a lot of those people I find are interested in being of service to others or on a different spiritual path. And a lot of times people that are service to others for some reason have a lower self-image. So there is a balance. If you have some level of compassion for yourself and you believe in yourself on a certain level, yet you are humble and it's not about the ego but your true self, then it's a positive and wonderful thing. But if you are in America, and much of American culture is spread throughout the world, it has embraced the value of self-admiration with a big warm hug. So you have to become aware of this. Not long ago, messages of self-admiration were directed toward people who really needed them. The 1987 book, Learning to Love Yourself, was written for the adult children of alcoholics who endured the emotional abuse of their parents. Now, however, self-admiration is considered extremely important for everyone at all times. Loving yourself means knowing how great you are and not letting any person, any place, or anything ever get in the way of that, writes Diane Mastromarino in her aptly titled 2003 book, The Girl's Guide to Loving Yourself, a book about falling in love with the one person who matters most, you. Of course, Joel Osteen, pastor with the largest church in the United States, writes, God wants us to have healthy, positive self-images. He wants us to feel good about ourselves. Self-esteem is considered, as one author put it, our national wonder drug. You can check out my playlist on self-image. Obviously, these issues are important. Understanding where these issues come from are important. But it's interesting that we have this seeming crisis in self-image. At the same time, we have a crisis in narcissism that are happening at the same time. And that is because that is third density that we're in now. There's really two kinds of souls that are on this earth right now that you can see a major difference in. It's not by race or political belief. It's service to self and service to others. And you can see it in governments, in political groups, because they are grouping in those natures. Some political groups are entirely about service to self. What can this do for me? And all of the leaders involved are all about themselves and how it serves them. They will say anything, they will do anything to get power. Those who are exclusively of service to self will ultimately seek power in any way, shape, or form. They will lie, they will steal, whatever it takes. And clearly, there's a substantial cottage industry that has grown up around self-admiration. Just do a quick search on Google. 191,000 hits for how to love yourself. With such tips as make a note every time someone says something nice about you. And it's true. Even though we have this crisis, many of us have a crisis in our own self-esteem. So how can we have this? Well, the truth of it is, the narcissist does not have good self-esteem either. And oftentimes they will project their own inadequacies on others by criticizing others to make themselves feel better. It's the ultimate bully in the playground that feels terrible about themselves and goes out and beats up the other little kids so they can feel better about themselves. So there's a way for us to love the self so that it doesn't become narcissistic. And this balance is a key fundamental lesson in the complex nature of third density. And there is no right or wrong answer. Every situation is different. And oftentimes the catalyst that you're receiving as you go through this spiritual walk towards the new earth is the catalyst of dealing with narcissism, both in yourself and others, and how you relate and how you work with it. We are being told now in America that even parents should treat their babies like they're the greatest thing ever. And there's so many self-help books and so many things out there. But it's excessive self-admiration that is what's happening, that's causing this. Narcissism is more than just really high self-esteem. It's confused with that. Narcissists do have high self-esteem, and in fact, many techniques used to increase self-esteem might lead to greater narcissism. But narcissism and self-esteem differ in an important way. Narcissists think they are smarter, better looking, and more important than others, or they try to trick themselves into believing that, but not necessarily more moral, more caring, or more compassionate. Narcissists don't brag about how they are the nicest, most thoughtful people in the world, but they do like to point out that they're the winners, or that they're hot. Wow, I look hot, they might say. This is one reason narcissists lack perspective. Close relationships keeps the ego in check. For example, if you beat a close friend in a tennis match, you typically don't scream in your face and do a happy dance. You say, good game. Narcissists are missing the piece about caring for others, which is why that self-admiration often spins out of control. It goes beyond just a love of self and a high self-esteem. It's a love of self beyond all others, and they will step on, lie, and do whatever it takes over anyone else. There is a group in psychology that try to argue that all narcissists are insecure and have low self-esteem. That's probably a myth. It's the nature of how they care about others over themselves that is the key. Someone would say, well, that person is justified because they're better looking and smarter, so they can't help it. And that justifies their beliefs. In many of the cases, according to the narcissism epidemic, narcissists didn't score any higher on objective IQ tests, and there's no correlation between narcissism and beauty aspects or general knowledge. So that, I believe, is a myth. Some people will say, well, narcissism is healthy. So should we all just hate ourselves instead? Of course, there are people that have even asked that out loud while listening to this podcast, saying that hating yourself is the alternative to loving yourself, and it's a false choice. Just as obesity researchers are not saying that Americans should all become anorexic. We're not suggesting self-hatred. A small number of people do hate themselves and could use some self-admiration. But you can like yourself just fine without loving yourself to excess. We believe that it would be better for loving everyone not to concentrate on self-feelings, positive or negative, quite so much. Instead, focus on life, your relationships with others, your work, on the beauty of the natural world, on others. Think about the deepest joy you experience in life. It doesn't typically come from thinking about how great you are. Instead, it comes from connecting with the world and getting away from yourself, as when you enjoy time with friends, family, and children are engaged at work. Is some amount of narcissism healthy? The real question is, healthy for whom? Selfishness, for example, might allow you to get a bigger piece of dessert after dinner, but will hurt your long-term relationships with your companions and might cost you a dinner invitation in the future. A narcissist would probably be on the first lifeboat of a sinking ship. A narcissist will testify against their own kids when put on trial. Hurting others is wrong, and that belief informs our stance on whether self-admiration is healthy. Narcissistic behavior that causes others to suffer is not healthy. If you have to do something that is uncomfortable that helps others, how do you think about it? Are you bothered by doing something that is mildly uncomfortable, yet it helps others? The narcissist doesn't care if it causes any problems with others, but if it causes some level of inconvenience for you, perhaps then you have an understanding of this dichotomy. According to the narcissism epidemic, true narcissism is growing more than ever before. College students in the 2000s were significantly more narcissistic than general Xers, according to that study, and baby boomers in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The boomers, a generation famous for being self-absorbed, were outdone by their children. By 2006, 2/3 of college students scored above the scale's original 79 to 85 sample average, a 30% increase in only 2 decades. Over the last few decades, narcissism has risen as much as obesity. In other words, the narcissism epidemic is just as widespread as the obesity epidemic. It is an epidemic. It's affecting our world. And there's not much we can do about it. In many cases, we simply cannot change the narcissist. So we have to understand them. We have to have an understanding of what's going on, what the differences are, and it has to just be brought into our knowledge because it affects your ability to create your reality because you have to interact with other people. How do we cure narcissism? In the movies, narcissistic characters are miraculously cured. Self-centered people get hypnotized, like in Shallow Hal, shocked with electricity, like What Women Want, shown their future in a Christmas Carol, caught in a cycle of time, like in Groundhog's Day, threatened by a sniper in Phone Booth, or captivated by cute young children in Jerry Maguire, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. Regarding Henry as the most direct, the narcissistic character is shot in the head and suddenly becomes a nice person. These are effective plot devices, but do not work in the real world. We do not recommend shooting your favorite narcissist in the head to try to cure them. There are good and bad ways to respond to epidemics, as we have learned with a current epidemic that we're going through. Obviously, there's improper and proper ways, but we should treat the narcissism like it's an epidemic. It's spreading like a virus. And you can look at the disease model to understand the spread of this epidemic. And for the people that are not at their spiritual core narcissistic, perhaps we can enlighten them to the power of serving others. I'm aware of a much larger scale of narcissism in my own life until I understood the dichotomy of serving self and others truly and made the choice, even though I was aware of the narcissistic tendency that I still have, to be of service to others. And when you get that taste of serving someone and helping someone out and feeling the joy of it, you suddenly realize that your path is simply wrong. You seek out joy in most cases. You move away from pain and towards pleasure. So suddenly, hey, those narcissistic aspects of myself are diminished as I stop thinking about myself. So you can quarantine yourself, which means you quarantine completely, not allowing those narcissists that are untreatable to affect you in any way. That's using the disease model that they mention in Narcissism Epidemic. But quieting the ego and understanding the ego is an important part of the process. In late 2006, a group of psychology researchers met in Flagstaff for a conference on quieting the noisy ego. In other words, strategies for quelling narcissism among individuals. Keith, who spoke at the conference, remembers discussing ideas with colleagues in front of the fireplace as a light snow fell outside, a definite upgrade from his usual life of sitting at a computer in a lab with asbestos floor tiles. The researchers used words now considered quaint, including humility and self-compassion and mindfulness. In many ways, humility is the opposite of narcissism. Some people misconstrue humility as bad, equating it with shame or self-hatred. When we hear Quo or Ra in the channelings, they always say they're humble messengers of the law of one, emphasizing that they are humble messengers. Humility is not the same as humiliation. True humility is a strength, the ability to see or evaluate yourself accurately and without defensiveness. Julia Eckstein, who researches humility, found that humble people are often surrounded by friends and family who support them and allow them to see themselves accurately. Sometimes this support comes through religion, as many religions emphasize humility. Overall, humble people are more connected to others. When you don't concentrate on pumping up the self, it is easier to relate to other people and the wider world. Many people think that humility is a virtue that only great leaders possess, like Gandhi or Mother Teresa, but everyone can practice humility by honestly appraising themselves, remembering people who have helped and supported them. Another unusual treatment for narcissism comes from compassion for yourself. Kristen Neff, who did Some of the first research on the concept writes that compassion for yourself works because people cannot always be or get exactly what they want. When this reality is denied or fought against, then suffering increases in the form of stress, frustration, and self-criticism. When this reality is accepted with sympathy and kindness, then greater emotional equanimity is experienced. Compassion for yourself isn't about admiring or esteeming the self or making excuses for shoddy behavior. It means being kind to yourself while also accurately facing reality. With self-compassion, you don't have to feel better than others to feel good about yourself, writes Neff on her website, selfcompassion.org. People who practice compassion for themselves experience less anger, fewer uncontrollable thoughts about themselves, less self-conspicuousness, and more positive emotions. Neff believes that compassion for yourself can be learned primarily through meditation. Mindfulness and outgrowth of traditional Buddhist practice may also reduce narcissism and quiet the ego. Mindfulness is the awareness of the present moment, the thought, the feeling, and the physical experience without negative judgment. It sounds simple, but trust me, it's not. When you eat, you might think about what you have to do for work the next day. When someone walks by without saying hello, you might become lost in concern about your appearance or fantasize about retaliation. Not only do your thoughts jump around, but they are accompanied by a heaping dose of self-concerned judgment. Why didn't that good fortune befall me? I'm smarter than so-and-so. How dare he say that? I want to kick his ass. Practicing mindfulness keeps the self from entering every experience in your life. Not only do you see the world more as it is, but the practice has clear benefits for your relationships, reducing conflict and keeping it from getting out of hand. When someone says something that you could interpret as critical or confrontational, you can learn to react more calmly. Fewer fights with your spouse, coworkers, or children. One aspect, if you're not necessarily into mindfulness, is simply becoming aware of the neutral observer. As you become aware of the neutral observer, you separate yourself from self, and you can watch yourself non-judgmentally, which gives you a greater ability to analyze the self and understand it. And if you're religious, drawing on the compassionate, mindful aspects of your faith is a great way to quiet the ego. All world religions teach love, compassion, and forgiveness. Do unto others as you wish them to do unto you. It is a classic Judeo-Christian principle that appears in many other religions as well. Islam's Prophet Muhammad said, "Not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you wish for yourself." The Buddhist Udanavarga says, "Treat not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful." The Talmud of Judaism says, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." This is the whole Torah, all the rest is commentary. Many of these strategies require practice and patience. Personal change takes work. In our culture, we are comfortable with the idea of practice for sports like golf. We know we will never be Tiger Woods, but we strive to improve. We are also fairly accepting of the idea that it takes practice to improve at school and at work. However, the idea that changing ourselves also takes practice is not as accepted, but you can change yourself. So I believe the only true way for us to cure narcissism is through the self. I really have never heard of a therapist that was able to accurately or effectively help a narcissist. The only way a narcissist can change is if they realize they're narcissistic and they choose not to be. Or they have narcissistic tendencies and they choose to be of service to others and they're given those opportunities and suddenly it lights up some part of them. So I'm speaking to those few people, that small group of people that are questioning what they want to do in the world, that have not chosen the service to self path, that maybe have narcissistic qualities. And if you start to meditate and go within and become the neutral observer, calm yourself down, become humble, reduce the ego, and then change the shift of your focus on the environment around you from yourself to others, suddenly this goes away. You can also pay attention to wider social connections in the world. No one can exist without massive amounts of support from others. And a lot of times that's the weakness of the narcissist. They think they can do it all themselves. And there's a few of you that simply can't stop feeding the ego. You can align your narcissism with behaviors that perhaps help the community. Then it's not really narcissism, maybe an overinflated ego that is service to others. It'd be great if beneficial forms of self-promotion, for example, donating enough money to have a hospital wing named after you, become more admired than other forms. Become a highly visible crusader for some positive change in your community. Start a foundation named after yourself, or donate several park benches to the community with small brass plaques featuring your name. That's one way you can funnel your narcissism into something that might be helpful to others. But if you can create a connection with other people, a loving connection with other people, and if you can understand the concept that you are everyone else, then you love everyone else. If you can awaken to the truth that everyone that you see, when you look into their eyes, they are you, and if you understand that they are you, then you can be narcissistic towards all of us at the same time. Because if you love them, you love you, and you can change and transform this state that you've entered into of narcissism. And maybe you're at 94% service to self, and you suddenly realize it's all wrong. I've been making a mistake. I've been gaslighting. I've been manipulating, and it's all wrong. So I choose to change. And you can do it if you shift your attention from others. Once you realize that everyone is you, every single person that you go by is you. Think about it. Your next door neighbor is actually you. Right now is you. If you can identify everyone as yourself, then suddenly everything changes. Everything changes. And you will change. It's easy to watch the media and the internet and read a lot of books and get caught up in a narcissistic mindset. And I believe there's a service to self group that wants you to be service to self, that wants you to think that it's normal and natural. But if you can embrace the service to others aspect of yourself, and many of you are, because you follow this podcast, and many of the people I'm talking to have chosen to be of service to others. And for those, I know you're going through struggles because all around you, the world is telling you to be narcissistic or self-loving in some way. And it's not terrible that you love the self, but if you truly love the self, then love others because they are the self. And that is all I'm saying. So you'll have narcissists that will challenge you, that will project their own inner flaws onto you because of their own insecurities and problems. And you know what? I had to learn just to ignore them. I might ask my friends what I should do about it. I might acknowledge my own weaknesses in seeing that in others. And then if you can attempt to solve it, try to do it. But as I learned, as other people who know me had experienced a recent event with a narcissist, maybe others on YouTube are aware of this, the best solution in most cases is to simply let it go and forget about it. If you realize that they're not willing to change or listen or talk with you in any way, and they're just lashing out because they are envious or jealous, then there's not much that you can do. I send them love. And I have learned that even those people that I find in their actions very uncomfortable to be a part of, I accept it. I send them love, and that's the best that I can do. When I had this event with a highly narcissistic person, in my own opinion, and perhaps I shouldn't assign them that state, but they were taking narcissistic behavior to an extreme. And I asked for help from the Facebook community, the Reality Revolution. I got some amazing suggestions. Your initial instinct when you deal with a narcissist is almost programmed. They know how you're going to respond. They want you to fight back. They want your antagonism. They want to trigger you to get your attention. They want to fight with you. They want to derail you. They want to hit your pressure points. They're incredibly manipulative. But you know what? Just forget about it. Wish them the best. Don't think of them in a negative manner. Wish them the best. Wish them the healing and all the things that their spirit wants. But quarantine yourself from the disease of the narcissism and let it go. Treat it like it's a disease. So stay at home and don't become a part of it, because guess what? I think in some cases, the narcissism can spread like a virus and it can affect you. It certainly has on a larger scale. But I wanted to address this because I see it as a significant part of our culture today, and it is affecting people on a spiritual level. For in some cases, they are trying to imagine a way of getting out of the narcissistic situation, or they see narcissistic behaviors within themselves, or they see it in society. And I just wanted to bring this to a level of discussion, and I want to hear from you. If you've had narcissists in your life, how did you deal with it? How did you escape from it? How did you transform them? Did you have a situation where you transformed the narcissist? Did you do it in some way that was a loving, powerful way that you can share with us? I'm going to be checking the comments, and I'll do another episode if I see some wonderful ideas on how to address the problem, the epidemic of narcissism in our world. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.